Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Nicholas Demetri, and this is a continuation of the series on the soul's journey into the family, pregnancy, conception, and raising the child from a spiritual viewpoint. I'd like to begin our discussion today by talking a little bit about the stages of pregnancy, both from a developmental standpoint, but also from a intuitive spiritual standpoint in what is happening in the development of the chakra system in the child while it's in the womb. And I'd like to first start with the first trimester. And here we're talking about the first 3 months of pregnancy. Now the first month, from weeks 1 through 4, involves the implantation and preparation for development of the tissues and organs. The fertilized ovum is implanted in the womb, and very gently the development of the major organ systems takes place. The brain, the spine, the heart, stomach, pancreas, lungs, genitalia, liver, feet, hands, and so on. And since the spine is one of the first things to develop along with the above organ systems that I mentioned, that the first 2 to 3 months of the fetus's physical life and development is primarily connected to what we call the seventh chakra center. The seventh chakra center is our connection to our oneness with the divine. It's the portal between energy and matter in the body. It's also the center that allows us to see with a greater overview our lives from a spiritual perspective. It gives us a sense of purpose, and it keeps us connected to a sense of eternity, harmony, and peace within ourselves. So when we talk about the development of this period in the first 3 months of life, we also can reference one of the psychiatrists, transpersonal psychiatrists, who did a lot of work, the holotropic breath work, Stan Grof, who talked about this period, the first trimester, as being one of what he called cosmic bliss. And in that cosmic bliss, we are in divine union and in oneness and in a state of connectedness to all things. This is not a mental process. This is something more from the heart, from the spirit. And for the mother, what would this mean? How can the mother support the developing fetus and soul that is incarnating at this stage in pregnancy? One thing that the mother can do is visualize a white light anchoring through her own body down into the fetus and into the crown chakra of the developing fetus and baby. And during this time, to continue to think thoughts of unity and harmony and security and safety for the child in its development. Another meditation process that the mother could apply is one in which she connects with the quantum field of the cosmos through meditation on space and energy, so that she might begin to focus on the different chakras in her body, chakras 1 through 7, and imagine the space surrounding the chakra in space and the energy of that chakra in space, so that this process creates a kind of an expansion and a movement into theta wave brain wave activity, which supports that union and resonance that the mother can feel with the developing fetus and the soul of this child at this stage of pregnancy. Now, the transition between the 3rd and 4th month is one of the critical points in pregnancy, because from a metaphysical or spiritual standpoint, this would be the same thing as what we've heard from the biblical text about leaving the Garden of Eden. So in this process, this emergence from the seventh chakra into what now will become the sixth chakra, which is the mind, and which is, in a way, our thought body, in also that realm of polarity, is the emergence of the soul in the Garden of Eden metaphor into the world. How was this emergence for the child, the actual child in the womb? If the mother has suffered trauma during the first 3 months, emotional stress, being hurried, not able to really connect with herself and this pregnancy that she's having, it can sometimes happen that the child can develop a kind of sense of premature separation in its consciousness. And here we're really talking about the soul, because the actual physical child is just beginning its organ development, its brain development, so it doesn't have a conscious awareness, but the soul of the child does. And that soul can then become aware of this transition from spirit, the world of spirit, to matter, as one that is easy, peaceful, and harmonious, or one that's abrupt and frustrating, sometimes creating a feeling of emerging into the mind and into matter as one of betrayal, one of abandonment, one of sadness, one of anger, and so on. So we could call this almost like the original source wound that a child might experience, or soul might experience, when it begins to move from the third to the fourth month. And what we see is one of three expressions of the soul's movement from spirit to matter. One is the soul in this incarnational process, as we mentioned yesterday, may feel very hesitant, resistant, or reluctant because the transition was not harmonious, smooth, and easy to adapt to. It's the same process, for example, if you're a child and you're going to school and you go to the school for the first day, you're going to be really anticipating not knowing what's going to happen. And if the environment is harmonious enough to allow for a good transition, you'll begin to feel safe and secure and grounded in this new environment and growth process you're in. So the same thing would apply in the womb for the child. That's one process. One could be expression of resistance or not wanting to come, as we mentioned yesterday. The other would be excitement, happiness, joy for moving on to the next phase and for incarnation. Another would be indifference, not really for or against it, just going through the process itself. And of course, that could also reflect the mother's state of mind and emotion as well as the father's, the whole family system. Is this child being received with joy and acceptance and anticipation? Or is this just another child along the block to take care of, which is just more work, more burden? Or is there an active resistance in the mother and the father, the whole family, toward having this child? What's the situation? And that will reflect also on this soul's sense of belonging and being received in the family. So you can ask yourself the question, how did you feel leaving the Garden of Eden? What happened for you in the first 3 months of your evolution in your mother's belly? What was the departure like? And so on. Then let's move to the second trimester, the months that would be months 4 through 6. And this is, first we'll start with the weeks 12 through 23. So this would be the first, the fourth, the fifth, coming to the fourth month now. And so initially weeks 13 to 16 will be the fourth month. The whole period is weeks 12 through 23. So in the fourth month, there's rapid growth of the child. Their coordinated limb movements begin in the child. The external genitalia are formed. The kidneys begin to function and produce urine. There's hair on the scalp. There's eyebrows, eyelashes. Sometimes when the parents see a picture of this child for the first time and they see the big eyelashes, they get very excited about it. Like, this makes this little fetus finally human. They can see it and such. The fetus can swallow the amniotic fluid that's in the mother's belly, the womb. And at this point, a critical event happens where the baby's heart establishes a normal rhythm. And that rhythm, somehow, if we think of it intuitively, that heart rhythm creates a resonance with the earth and the rhythm of the earth and the heart rhythm of the earth. And at that point, the developing fetus and the soul that is accompanying it can begin to feel what the resonance of being on planet Earth is going to be about for it. Maybe in a general way, not specifically yet, because its senses have not yet developed. But in a general sense, it's, do I really want to be here or not? But it's also a commitment, I am here. And that's around the 4th month of pregnancy. So at this point, there is the awakening of the 6th chakra, when we think of this spiritually and metaphysically. And the 6th chakra has to do with our intuition, our vision, our higher thought processes, our ability to create intention in our lives, to actually understand things. Also, it includes our intellect as well. It's the mind and everything that goes with the mind. So at this point in time, the baby, one can encourage and support the baby's movement into this resonance, because each movement from one chakra to another creates a new resonance for that child's experience, both with its environment, the mother, and the family. So in this case, one thing that the mother can do, or the parents can do, is sing lullabies to the child. Also mantras, which keep a kind of mental resonance and peace and harmony on this level for the child's development. As we go on, the child moves into the 5th month of development. And in the 5th month, some of the anatomical changes that take place, their sucking reflex develops. The fetus can now, the movement of the fetus can now be felt by the mother. So in the 5th month, it's interesting. It's almost like that's the point where the family realizes there's a real living being that's coming into the world, that there's movement. And even though they knew there was a baby in there before, for the most part, it's an unseen presence, unless the parents are tuned spiritually and energetically. So at the 5th month, the fetus is also covered by a waxy substance called vernix. And this protects its fragile skin. And it's interesting, just recently a lady who's a homeopathic doctor shared that one of the remedies that she's found that they are giving more and more to autistic children that seem to be disconnected from being in the world is a remedy that is a potentization of vernix. So it can be that at the 5th month, there is the impact of the vibration of the environment becomes stronger for this developing child. All the inner structure of organs become better defined at this point. The baby now in this 5th month perceives light, smell through the mother's belly, and at this time the throat chakra, the 5th chakra, begins activating. Now when we think of the throat chakra, it's our communication center, But it's more than vocal communication. It also represents, in a general way, all the senses, the smell, the sight, the hearing. It's interesting that the first sense to develop is the hearing. And it's important, I think, because sound moves more quickly through water or liquid, so the child can begin to really contact the outer world. But also because the child is still in a semi-spiritual, interdimensional state, it will be able to perceive and hear the mother's words and thoughts, or at least feel the resonance of those thoughts, as well as that of the family. So the child's communication at this point on all levels begins to develop: hearing, sensing, the outer world, seeing, and so on. So this is a period where the parents can engage more actively in actually speaking to the child. Playing music, using light to stimulate awareness in the child. The mother and father can communicate and stimulate the child's development by recognizing that that child is now connected to their sensory physical awareness and the outer environment more. As we go on to the 6th month. In the 6th month, this is weeks 21 to 24, the brain is growing more rapidly. The eyes are beginning to open. The lung sacs are forming. They're not mature yet, but they're functioning. The lung size is increasing. And also in the 6th month, the baby can actually assume a fetal position. So there's actually beginning to be movement for the child. And it begins to feel more constricted in the womb. In Stan Groff's research of birth-related trauma as well as trauma, intrauterine trauma, that this second stage, which would be the 4th to the 6th month, he sometimes called problems that develop called cosmic entrapment, because the child is actually beginning slowly between the 4th and 6th month to push against the womb. It's beginning to get larger, and it's beginning to feel more confinement of its space, but also more volition in itself. So in the 6th month, the heart chakra begins to develop. This is the 4th chakra. And with it, the power of love. And the brain is not sufficiently developed at that point in time to sense any logical information coming to it, of course, but feelings leave their imprint. And so as we go along the pregnancy, by the 6th month, that what we call the etheric body, which is the template on which the physical body is built, that this etheric body has the function of carrying information. And that's information both genetically as well as energetically, emotionally, mentally, of the parents, the ancestry, and so on. And the heart is taking this in. So the communication of love from the mother at this point can really deepen the child's sense of security and nourishment. It's important in this period, the 6th month, that the mother be surrounded by supportive people. Now this is an interesting thing, because sometimes you hear stories of, because at this point one can see normally the belly is beginning to grow in the mother, the movement of the child is making the fact that this little member of the family is a reality to come, that there is a need to be around supportive people. Because as we said, the child's senses and etheric capacity to imprint information from the world around it and inside it from the mother is getting greater and greater. So it's also important at this stage to play music that is calming, that corresponds to the mother's heartbeat. So again, this combination of recognizing that the heart center of the child is now opening to receive and give information, that one should also support that in the mother and in the environment in which the child will be born. So from the 4th to the 6th month, again, to review, the baby is very connected very directly to its etheric body, which contains all the information set of its life, its ancestry, its genetics, and so on. Let's talk about etheric energy a little more at this point so we can better understand what I mean by etheric energy. Life force energy is another word we can use for it. There are 4 functions of etheric energy as discussed and given by the Greek Cypriot mystic healer and teacher Stylianos Ateshlis, better known as Daskalos, who I had the good fortune to have met and spent time learning with and receiving a great deal of support for my own work for. And the 4 functions of etheric energy: kinetic, sensory, imprint, and creative. So what does that mean? Kinetic would mean that etheric energy moves. We can actually move energy. Anyone who, for example, studies the martial arts or Tai Chi or Qigong knows that through intention and through mental clarity and concentration and positive emotion, one can move energy and create from that energy. So there is a movement that the child feels in its body, and also there's the second function of etheric energy, the sensory, which has to do with feeling. So the child is transforming its sensations into actual feelings in its body. It's going to feel either good, pleasant, unpleasant, pain, happiness, in a very primal way. Then the third is the imprint function of ether, and we spoke about this a little before. In the imprint function means that we are able to imprint the information field that our parents are giving us, that's coming from their consciousness, from their genetic code system, as well as ancestral tendencies, and also carrying on our past life tendencies as well. There are imprints that allow us to eventually recover memories of other times beyond our current life that we'll come into. Also, that imprint function involves imprinting astrological influences at the time we are born. There's a lot of work that has been done, for example, on the generational signature of children, which involves, just briefly to say, involves where Pluto is transiting at that time collectively in the collective astrology. And this tends to bring certain themes and issues to a generation at hand. So even these influences, so they're microcosmic influences, the family system and the parents, and then the ancestry, then macrocosmic influences. When were you born? What's happening in the world at the time you were born? And so on. So we talk about the 4 functions of etheric energy. And the last function, so there's kinetic, which is more movement. There's sensory, which is feeling, and also pleasure, pain. There's the imprint function, which is the retaining of information from the field, from the morphogenetic field. And there's the creative function, which is the ability to transform or change things. And the creative function is the most important in a way for the parents, because at this point in time, the parents can input more positive information on that child through the child's sensory input, by talking to the child and also using their hands, for example, to hold the child with color and with positive emotion. Even I think many parents would say, well, I can't hold my child because the child is still in the womb. But it's so interesting how you see pictures, for instance, of the father kissing the belly of the mother. Says, I just really want to get close to that child. And so in a way, if you understand that we are also energy, not only matter, but energy, that you can then apply that principle to support your child energetically through positive feelings. You can imagine your physical hands and arms, etherically, your light body hands and arms, reaching into the womb and holding the child with love. And that child will experience the sensation of that and the support from that. So I think this is a very important part of the process at this stage, which would be, we're talking about the 6th month, where also the heart is very awake and opening in its awareness. Hearing the mother, just simply speaking to the child and holding that child visually. For instance, there have been a lot of experiments that have emerged in the last 20 years about how energy is not bound so much to time and place, and that we can reach with our love and with our thoughts and feelings across the world and touch people that we love, know, or make contact with. And I share this because I want to really emphasize that at this stage, this is a very important point in the child's development, where you can begin to welcome that child into the world as an energetic being. So, for example, there have been studies done where people have been separated by 500 kilometers, put in isolated chambers. One individual is given a possession of the other, perhaps a ring, a necklace, a picture, and is asked to send healing thoughts and love to the other person. And in one experiment, particular experiment that was done at the University of Nevada, the researchers had constructed also a little doll that looked like the actual person that's receiving the healing, and they would give that doll to the person that would be sending love and sending energies. And during this experiment, the people receiving the energy would be measured for their physiological response. So their brainwave activity, their EEG, their EKG, their pulse rate, their blood pressure, and so on would be measured to see how they responded, and also subjectively, how did they feel when they received this healing energy. They were not told exactly when it would happen, so that would be would allow the experimenters to see if there's a direct shift during the time that the person is sending healing or thoughts or whatever. And because the researchers had a curiosity, probably from Hollywood, about this whole concept of voodoo and sticking pins in little dolls and seeing people writhing in pain, they said, well, let's give them a little doll and let them see what they do with the doll in a positive sense, of course. So in the experiment, the people sending energy would send the energy, and of course, the response was quite positive. The blood pressure normalized, the brainwave activity was normal, the heart rhythm was normalized, and so on. The people responded with feeling better, feeling good during these periods when the energy was being sent. But with a humorous note, all the people receiving the healings in this experiment experienced warm feelings on their shoulders and arms. And the researchers couldn't explain this scientifically, so they asked the people sending the healing energy, well, what did you do? And the people said, well, we didn't really know what to do with the doll, so we just gave the doll a massage on the shoulders. And the participants that were receiving the energy were actually feeling those sensations. So given that kind of response, if you think of how your thoughts and emotions can impact a developing baby, there's a very direct connection. So in this case, being able to be with that child, send positive energy, send good energy, can only help its development. This is also a point in the 6th month when the child, making those connections with its senses, sight, hearing, taste, sound, all of this, it also, and movement, it's also becoming aware of its physical body more fully. So if you might remember in our first talk, we talked about making a choice for the right physical body. So at this stage, that soul that is incarnating in that body might actually be sensing, do I have a real resonance with this body or not? Do I have something that doesn't feel quite in harmony with it? And this, of course, can lead one to a lot of speculation about what really happens to some people, for instance, that make changes in their sexuality or changes even in their gender, or other kinds of feelings of not feeling comfortable in their body, being dissociated from their body, and so on, or even hating their body. So even though I don't want to imply that if something is uncomfortable to the soul, at that stage, that would mean it would lead to any of those things. But it's something for one to explore therapeutically, especially if a person does have an issue with their body or their body image, perhaps even at that, for them to look more deeply and to ask, did anything happen for me during the pregnancy? And to really explore that 6th month and what the impact of feeling that you now own, you now are inhabiting a new physical body as a soul essence. So at this stage, the 2nd trimester, the 4th to the 6th month, we talked about sometimes on an emotional and psychological level that Dr. Groff called this cosmic entrapment. And this could be if a trauma, for example, happened during this period. If the mother has a lot of stressors, problems in the family, issues with herself and whether she really wants this pregnancy or not on a deeper level, then this can create sometimes a disposition in the child toward despair, hopelessness, depression, isolation, a feeling of not belonging to anyone or anything. It could be, for example, something happened to the partnership during this period, maybe a divorce, or the mother's health might be suffering from the pregnancy, financial issues, security issues, and so on. So if there is a break in the continuity of love at this point, there's going to be a sense of disconnect from love and a tendency toward more disconnected feelings, separation, despair, and so on in the child as it grows up. Even though this isn't an absolute by any means, it's something to look at, because if a feeling or chronic depression or feelings of isolation, despair, betrayal patterns are present in an adult, if one does a process to go back and examine and explore what happens, where would that impact be during the pregnancy, perhaps they'll find that more often than not, that period, the 2nd trimester, would be when it would have happened. It's good. It's okay. Is it okay? Is it okay? Great. Okay, sure. Yeah, and then let's move on now. Let's do the third trimester. And it's interesting, we can almost say the first trimester is head, the second is heart, and the third is belly and will. So let's go to the 7th month. The 7th month is the 25th to 28th week. So it's interesting, at this point, the life force energy of the baby is getting stronger as the child is growing more and more. The solar plexus chakra now begins to develop. That's the belly center. And the child is fully in the physical world at this point. It may be inside the mother, but it's actually in the physical world. It has a sense of itself more consciously. Its strength and its emotions are set. It's beginning to control more its activities. So it's beginning to develop a very rudimentary sense of self-awareness, instinctual awareness, but nevertheless, it's self-awareness. And this stage is vital because in a sense it can influence the self-confidence and the opportunity for success of that child later in life, because the child is beginning to take charge and control of itself, at least as a physical, instinctual being. So at this point, again, talking to the child, encouraging it, kind of letting it know what's coming, that it's going to be coming into the world, for it to have patience, to encourage it to grow stronger and more determined. All these sort of qualities of the solar plexus chakra would be supportive and really be good. I'm sure some fathers at this point, if it's a boy child, would like to sit and watch football together, but I'm not recommending that exactly here, but just to say, so talking to the child, paying attention to their movements inside and responding to those movements can be helpful. So that's the 7th month. And then we go on to the 8th month, which is 29 to 32 weeks. And what I see quite often in families is by the 8th month, the reality that this baby, of course some mothers start at the 6th month, they start decorating the room the baby's going to be in, painting the walls, putting nice things up, just to anticipate the coming of the child and creating. But by the 8th month, I think that's a much more active process for some couples. That's 29 to 32 weeks of the pregnancy. And this is a time when the sacral chakra, the 2nd chakra, begins to develop. And what I want to clarify is when we say a chakra is developing, what I mean by that is that the etheric energy field that has always been there in the development of this child's physical body, that this etheric field and the physical field and the nerve plexuses become more connected. So the energy body and the nerve plexuses, or the little brains, which are all the chakra plexuses, become more connected, and there becomes more of an awareness, a consciousness physically for the child it's developing. So the sacral chakra is important too, because it represents in us our passion, our strong emotion, our celebration of life, our joy. It also represents our creativity as well. It is linked very much to the throat chakra and our expression. So the sacral chakra and throat chakra are quite linked. So at this stage, it's interesting. It would be good for the mother, for example, besides the decoration of the room and opening this creative space for the child, which again resonates with the child's development at that stage, would be to get engaged more in playing music, writing, painting, transmitting, finding ways to transmit that energy to the baby. So this would be then the 8th month. A lot of emotional traumas, if they're going on in the parents or in the family around that time, can likely impact the emotional state of that child later. And again, it's a matter of looking and exploring when there is a problem, and then coming back and looking at when it may have happened historically, finding out from the mother. It was very interesting. I recently did a seminar on this topic, and there was a man in the seminar, and I had asked them to go through a meditation process and see if they connected with a certain month when they felt intuitively something may have happened for their parents, their mother, during the pregnancy. So this man connected with, I think it was the 8th month, one of the 8th or 7th or 8th month, and he went back and he asked his mother that night, because I asked him, if your parents are still alive, go back and ask your parent if they remember anything that happened during that time. So he asked his mother, and she immediately said, oh yes, I remember this very clearly, that your father and I were going to go to the movies, and we went to a movie, but we didn't realize it was actually a horror film. It was about aliens. And she said, I was terrified the whole time that was in the movie. And he was amazed because he had actually been able to connect with the month. Something wasn't right. And he had some issues also with fear and commitment and so on. So it's, again, it's amazing that we know within ourselves. We can intuitively know. Our inner wisdom will show us when something perhaps happened. And when we can verify this with our parents, it's a wonderful experience, because then you can really look at it tangibly and let it go and move on. So let's go on to the 9th month. So mothers, you made it. Hopefully made it to the 9th month, 33 to 36 weeks. The baby is now changing position normally to be born. So at this point, the root chakra becomes active. Our root chakra is our connection with the planet Earth, our presence in the world, also our ability to manifest, to create. It's our health. It has to do with our health. It has to do with material abundance and the living space and rhythm of our lives. So in a way, it is our identity in this world. As the baby comes into the world, this root chakra also becomes the focus of the first year of life. What happened, of course, during the birth? Most of what we think about when we think of something happening for us psychologically in pregnancy would be what happens in the actual birth process. So there's a lot that's been written about this. You know, did the baby turn properly? Did the baby come feet first? Would there have to be a cesarean section? Was there fetal distress of a large kind? Was the baby almost lost? Was there a cord around the baby's neck? A lot of drama can take place in this birth process. But I share this with also the realization for everyone that it's not the beginning of everything. There's 9 months when things happen. And I just want you to be aware of that looking for the source of a disconnect with your mother, with your parents, with your family, with the world, and what choices you made can even begin during the whole pregnancy period. So again, how is the baby received in the world when it's born? I've seen many cases of people who, for example, let's look at some of the common ones. One would be a mother who had had an abortion or had a miscarriage in a pregnancy before a successful carrying of a pregnancy, and still has unresolved emotions, sorrow about it, and the newborn child carries that. And somehow the newborn child might be, in some cases, the subject of too much fear and concern, like something might happen to them, and the parents are just overly protective of the child. Just one example. Another might be near-death experiences that happen for the child, like a cord around the neck, or where there has to be an emergency cesarean section. There's also some question about what happens with the child's sense of will and effort and determination when the mother has to undergo a cesarean. And there's some preliminary evidence that it could impact the child's motivational system, but I don't think conclusions have been drawn, because anything's possible there. Or if the child is born feet first. So there's a lot of implications and a lot of stuff out there about what that means. But you have to really look at each situation and look in yourself and ask, where is my issues, or where are my issues in life, and what could this have to do with the impact of when I, was developing as a baby and my mother. The third trimester, as we're talking about, that's sometimes referred to as the life-death struggle, the birth, life-death struggle. And again, this gigantic struggle, in a way, for the child being born, squeezed through a lot of pressure, coming through the womb, coming into the world, can leave an imprint. But when it is successful, it's almost like saying, I made it. I've got the will, I've got the determination, hang in there, the lights at the end of the tunnel, quite literally, on both sides, and I can manage. So I go through the challenges of life, but I succeed, and I get out the other side, all right? And I can make it no matter what happens. So again, faith, trust are part of this, as opposed to a trauma happens and the development in the parents of, oh my God, the child almost died, I have to really overcare for them, and that might create in the child a sense that the world's a dangerous place, I'm vulnerable, I don't have what it takes to make it, and so on. So that's, in essence, some of the information that I sometimes apply when I do my own therapeutic processes with people, and when deeper issues emerge, to help them understand the origin of the issue, and also bringing conscious light and release to those issues to move into a better state of health and well-being.